Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 5, Episode 2, The Ship. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and X as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are awesome. We're a great, good time. Talking about this show that's 30 years old, and you're going to love it. I know you will if you just give it a chance. So come join us. But yes, as David said, we are talking about this episode here, which is the ship, and it's the, correct me if I'm wrong, as you said earlier, the 100th episode for Deep
According
Space
to
Nine.
Wikipedia's count, I'm assuming they're correct. Their count is a little off in some areas, but anyway, yes, according to them, this is the 100th episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So yeah, we've had our 100th episode a couple episodes back, but the show itself, this is a milestone of sorts.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because at this point in the Star Trek, lore, I guess, it was almost seen as standard that these shows were going to reach 100, um, you know, Next Generation did it. Now Deep Space Nine did it. Voyager does it, and then it just kind of became their thing.
Mhm.
I don't think there's a show in any of the newer versions that didn't hit um 100 episodes. But actually, no. Now that I say that, we might have to double check on Enterprise. I think Enterprise gets really close, but they don't hit 100. So I have to go back and check on that because Enterprise did some weird things with their filming and things like that. So they might have actually hit it. But yeah, so far every other show has done it.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's an interesting thing to have on a show, a 100th episode. It's not exactly common, or it wasn't common then. And now with the way that we do shows and how they film seasons and the short seasons, everything else, it's probably never going to happen again. So what
Right.
an interesting time in television that it was seen as common for shows to hit 100, and now we'll probably again never see that. Like we talked about before, like Discovery, for example, it would take Discovery filming for, close to 10 seasons before they would get to a 100th episode, the way that they do episodes now.
Right.
But before we dive into the show, of course, we'd like to do a little bit of catch up here. So, David, how has your week been?
It's been good. I finished the first book of the Silo series, Wool, this week. The show on Apple TV is better than the book. Not that the book is bad, as I said last week, but finished this. Looking forward to season two because season two will probably be what happens in part of this book. And then yesterday, I started reading this. It's a book that came out about the aftermath of the Hiroshima bombing, the nuclear bombing. Because world events really makes you start thinking about things, if you will, to keep it mild. The cost of war and all that. And I already bought that book, was already planning on reading it, but I read the book about 9/11 last month, back in September, and this is a similar kind of tale. People telling their stories about the trauma that they experienced as a part of the nuclear attack. So yeah, that's what I'm reading. It's a shorter book. So next week I'll be reading Red Rising, which is a very popular book. Apparently, I don't know if you've heard of it, Perry. It's a sci-fi story. The gist is that there is a group of people on Mars. I don't know how big the civilization is, but the Reds are a strata of the society that do all the manual labor, and they think that they are making Mars into a paradise. But it turns out that Mars is already a paradise, and they're just being exploited for their labor by the rich on Mars. So that's all I know about the story. My roommate has read it and really likes it. He's actually rereading it because of a new book in the series just came out. And he was like, "Hey, I'm rereading it. Do you want to read it?" I was like, "Well, I'm reading The Expanse with Perry. I can read the Red Rising series with you." So we're doing that. I'll be keeping
Okay.
you guys in the loop with that one. As that by next week, I'll have some feedback to give. So
Okay.
yeah. How about you? What's new with you?
Well, besides today being a just dumpster fire of a day. Um, Everything throughout the week have been okay. I've got some upcoming things that are going to happen. That's on a other personal level. Looks like that's finally moving forward. Might get into that one day here or not, whatever. But work is going fine. I have been thinking about maybe making some changes, moving into some other areas, so we'll see about decisions on that. But otherwise, things are going pretty well. Enjoying still
Good.
doing the workouts and stuff. Have started posting things for that as well. So stay tuned. You can find the links for things like that on Facebook first if you want to, follow along or just see what kind of workouts I do or anything like that. Just go to our Facebook page. Which again, is just the Fire Caves, the Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast, and you will find all those things there. Um, Other than that, I've been like casting around and looking for other shows to watch because sometimes as much as I love Star Trek, I feel like I could watch it all the time, and kind of do. You want something different, and I found this show called Scavenger's Reign on Max, and it's an animated show. There's only like 3 episodes right now, and it's got to be the most bizarre sci-fi show I've ever seen. It follows the crew of a crashed freighter ship called the Demeter, and they have landed on this planet that is full of all these bizarre plants and creatures, and they're basically having to figure out a way to survive until they can be rescued.
Right.
And man, and it's got this. The thing I like about it a lot, which also kind of disturbs me, is the music because it's this kind of melodic yet atonal music that has an odd beat to it. So the way that it plays into the episode, it makes you kind of uneasy with everything that's going on, and you're just kind of tense watching the development of the characters. And there was one alien that they come across that really creeps me out because it gets inside your mind and it uses the images of people that you think of to make you do things. So this guy, he kind of has these moments of senility where he wakes up and he realizes that he's not where he's supposed to be and not doing what he's supposed to and whatever else. And right before he can actually, kind of move away and escape, the thing comes back and kind of makes him submit all over again. And so
Oh man.
it's really trippy.
Okay.
And
You
then
said
there's
it
a
was, what was it called again? Scavenger's Reign.
scavenger's reign,
Is that rain as in rain or as in like
as in like,
power rain?
yeah, power, as
Okay.
in, yeah. And it's interesting that, so I was thinking about that when I was watching the episode, trying to figure out what it means. And in watching the episode, the best that I can determine, it's that everything in the all the aliens that you see, the alien creatures, plants, all of it, they all seem to have this instinctual like need to consume. So if anything is anywhere for long enough, eventually something shows up and tries to eat it, break through it, destroy it, whatever. So you've
Right.
got these humans that are trying to survive in this while the whole environment, even the plants that they're walking on in real, are trying to adapt them to them. So it's like
Oh.
who's going to survive here? Is it going to be
Huh.
the creatures, or there was even one where it was like there was a whole room of fungus, and the fungus was trying to consume two of the people, and it was making them hallucinate that they were already consumed. So it was like, you already consumed, don't put up a fight. But by you
Mm,
not putting up a fight, it's actually consuming you. So it was there's a lot
that's
stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's creepy and
uh,
trippy all over the place. Yeah.
Exactly. That was like, so I'm like, I'm watching it. And I'm like, man, it's really pretty, and I like the way that it's filmed, and I like the action stuff that you see. But then like they do these bits, and you're like, I'm not sure if this is something that you could watch like with kids or not, because
Probably not.
at some point you feel like, oh, this is fine, and then in the next, like they're just hacking away at something. You're like, oh, never mind. So
They're taking the
yeah.
idea of an alien planet pretty seriously, huh?
Yeah, it's very alien, and I like that a lot. I like that nothing is what you think it is. Even like there's a robot that's supposed to be like a helper robot, and it gets infected with this fungus. And the fungus seems to act a lot like neural tissue. So as it intermingles with the robotics own system. The robot is seemingly becoming self-aware. And on the one hand, the robot seems very just like it's developing this very pleasant, very positive, forward-thinking
Personality.
personality. But then in an instant, it will do something and just like obliterate something. And you're
Yeah,
like,
lash out. Yee.
mm, what's that about? Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's and I'm like, I want to see more about this robot. What you gonna do? You know, so if you're interested, check it out. It's on Max again. It's called Scavenger's Reign. So yeah,
Okay.
and then there was another robot show that I watched on Max, and this one has what's his name? Michael B. Jordan, that's his name.
Yeah.
He's the voice on this particular show, and I'm trying to find the name of it right now while I'm talking to you. But it's interesting that it's kind of like a take on Voltron to a certain degree, and he was like a hotshot pilot, and there's these other aliens that have come to Earth and are we're kind of battling it out with them. And he's a pilot. His plane gets shot down, and then his body is harvested, and they turn him into a walking mech, so he can control these other robots and stuff, and kind of put up a fighting force for
Right.
humanity. But there's like multiple copies of him running around. So then he's got to like fight the bad versions of himself and stuff. So there's a whole season of that. Actually, there's two seasons of it, and you've got to work your way through it. He's got like a little team and stuff that are helping out. That one was pretty interesting as well. So yeah, I wish I could remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but I can't.
Okay.
But yeah, check it out. Shouldn't be hard to find. Michael B. Jordan's the main voice. So if you search him for an animated show, I'm sure it's going to pop up. Interesting animation. It's like a heavy CGI with a little bit of like a weird cartoon draw overlay. So I don't think I've ever seen anything like that recently. So that's been pretty interesting as well. So yeah, check those things out if you're interested or not. And then of course, I am also working my way through the Expanse as well, so that we can talk about that. I figure
Yeah.
we'll work our way through the first half, stop, do a talk, then we're next half, stop, finish it up.
Yeah.
Um, but we're not here to talk about all of those things that are not Trek related. We are here to talk about Star Trek. We're here to talk about the
Ooh.
ship and a very interesting 100 episode, if I may say so myself. Because, as we said with episode one of this season, this is when Deep Space Nine really kind of kicks it up on their Dominion storyline, giving us a lot of development there. Because we've kind of wrapped up all the interpersonal stuff with characters to a certain degree. We kind of know who everybody is, probably with the exception of Dax, who remains criminally undeveloped for some reason. But we get a lot of her here. We
She
get a lot
does
of her in
have something to
this.
do here. That's right.
Yes. So, with that being said, would you like to give the recap for this episode, or do you want me to do it?
I'll do it, seeing as how you got last week. All right, guys. So I'm gonna quickly knock out the B plot because it's very simple. Odo has to arrest Quark and Bashir because Bashir asked Quark to get him some spiders that turned out were requiring paperwork. But Quark, being the devious guy that he is, also used that opportunity to get himself some crystals, apparently aphrodisiac crystals of some kind. Those were super illegal, and so Odo has to arrest both of them. And Kira's like, I ain't got time for this nonsense. The captain and the rest of the crew need the Defiant, and so I'm going to go save them from our A plot. So the A plot is that Cisco, Dax, Worf, and O'Brien and a group of other cadets have gone to a planet in the Gamma Quadrant to explore for mining. It has a certain type of mineral that they think would be really worth it. But while they're there, a Dominion warship crashes on the planet. And they go to investigate it, and they find the crew dead inside. But meanwhile, the runabout that was above the planet sees a Dominion warship warp into the area. It attacks the runabout and destroys it. So the runabout crew is killed. That means that our crew with Cisco and the others suddenly are being attacked by Jem'Hadar, and they're in a bad situation. So they actually managed to get into this Dominion warship that's crash landed and then use that to protect themselves. they're in there and they have to turn things on. They don't recognize the technology. It's very different than their own technology, and they realize that they have a technological marvel on their hands. If they can keep this ship and get it back to the Federation, they can try and reverse engineer this technology. But unfortunately, O'Brien has to try and reverse the technology so that they can try and escape. Uh, they have to the Dominion beam down and try and talk to Cisco, and they have a Vorta supervisor. The Vorta, as we might remember, are the race of beings that are like the handlers of the Jem'Hadar. And the woman who comes down tries sweet talking Cisco, but he's not having any of it. He knows that she is being devious and that there's something about the ship that she wants. So even though she offers to take Cisco and the others safely back to the station in return for allowing her to have the ship back, he tells her that they're going to fight to the death before they're going to just go along with the Jem'Hadar. The Jem'Hadar had used this opportunity to sneak one of their men on board, and he nearly takes out some of our crew. Meanwhile, one of the members of our crew is a guy named Muniz. Nunez, sorry,
Enrique
Nunez.
Muniz, yes.
Muniz, I'm sorry, and he is very friendly with O'Brien. He's a yellow shirt. They had been talking earlier, but he had been wounded pretty severely during the initial assault. He is able to save Dax and Worf. Dax and O'Brien from an attack of a Jem'Hadar, but Worf thinks that they should just kill him. They should kill Muniz because he is already gravely wounded, and O'Brien is incensed by that. It might take 2.5 days for the Defiant to come save them, but they're going to do everything they can to save him. Unfortunately, he is not doing well, and over the course of the next 48 hours, he continues to decline. Nunez is nearer and nearer to death throughout their experience. Cisco once again goes out and talks with the Vorta supervisor Kilana, and she tries convincing them once again that they have something on the ship that they want, and again, if they will just give them the thing that they want, or if they will be allowed to get the thing they want, they will let Cisco have the ship and let them go away. But Cisco doesn't trust her, and so the Jem'Hadar start bombing the planet around the ship, but they are obviously not actually hitting the ship. It's just for show. And so they keep working to try and get the ship working, try and get the weapons working. And in the process, Muniz does die. He unfortunately does pass. And before he passes, he's kind of hallucinating, remembering like a 4th of July fireworks explosions. And it's a very sad moment, especially for Cisco, who had promised him that they would save his life. However, they realize the longer they're waiting and waiting and waiting, eventually one of the items aboard the ship starts melting, and it turns out it's a changeling. A changeling drips down from the ceiling and dies, and that turns out to be the item. Not we thought it was an item, but the thing that the Vorta and the Jem'Hadar were looking for. Unfortunately, the changeling dies, and so the Jem'Hadar, all off screen, kill themselves because they weren't able to save one of their gods, the changelings. And so Kilana is left alone and vulnerable, but she comes aboard the ship and asks for the ability to take away some remains of the changeling. And then talking with Cisco, Cisco realizes that if he had just trusted Kilana, or if she had trusted him, and they had just realized that all Kilana wanted was the changeling, and they would have allowed them to take the ship, they would have been able to escape, and people like Muniz might have lived. And so at the end of the episode, Cisco is talking with Dax about regretting the fact that people had to die in order to get this technology. Even though 5 people died and they might save 5,000 or 5 million, it doesn't make it any easier for him to, have an emotional connection with the people who died. He He remembers their lives. He remembers the details about them as individuals that he had come to know. For example, he had um, performed a marriage for one of those who had died. So that's the end of the episode. Did I miss anything, Perry?
No, you hit the salient details there, and if anybody has any, wants to know all the ins and outs, you can go and watch the episode on Paramount Plus. It's there right now. In fact, I highly suggest that you do go and watch it, and then come back and listen to us and offer your take on what we say. Do you agree? Do you disagree? So forth and so on. And again, these episodes they're 30 years old at this point, so we don't really care if you think this is a spoiler or not. And yeah, just go and enjoy it, and then come back. Let us know. We would love to hear from you. So yeah,
Yeah,
but no, you hit the high points, and we're getting ready to get into it anyway. So here we are.
yeah.
Now, of course, like we do every single time, since this is your first go through on this show, what did you think of this episode, the second in the fifth season, and the auspicious 100th?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a very serious episode. The last couple of minutes of the episode are not a quick little "oh, I'm so sorry these people died." It's a serious conversation between Cisco and Dax. He's not like torn up in the sense that he's like emotionally distraught or unable to do his duty, but he's having to write up a mission report at the end of this episode, and he's having a hard time starting it. Like, how do you just quickly summarize the events of some people dying without really recognizing who they were? Basically, uh, his question is it worth it? These people having died for being casualties for a greater purpose. And Dax says things like, they knew what they were getting into, they knew what they had signed up for. Um, but Cisco points out that like that doesn't minimize their lives, and he does detail things about these people that had died. For example, Munez's birthday was the same as Jake's, and then one of them knew how to play the trumpet really well. And like I said, he did the ceremony. He performed a wedding for one of them. So it's very easy to talk about how to perform your duty, but then doing it, especially in these moments, are very hard. And then there's also the other point of if Cisco had trusted uh, Jelana, the Jem'Hadar handler, about what they wanted, what each side wanted or was willing to do, then they wouldn't have had death. The changeling died because Kilana couldn't convince Cisco to give her the changeling. She wouldn't admit that's what she wanted. They thought he would use the changeling as a hostage, but
Mhm.
Cisco's not that type. He says, I would not have done that. I just wanted the ship. And she said, we would let you have the ship if you'd given us the changeling. And so, yeah, it's a it's a serious episode, and it's not as fun as last episode. Like last episode had fun, had action. This one was very serious. People die, um, and die in kind of painful, sad ways. I mean, Nunez, his death is a slow one. He's bleeding
Yeah.
out. He's shaken. He's having hallucinations. Um, Cisco yells at O'Brien and Worf because they get into it when Worf is like, we should we shouldn't just tell him he's going to live when he's not. In fact, we should kill him, give him an honorable death as opposed to this pathetic just slowly dying. Dax gets a smirky comment in during that scene, which I thought was a lot of character for a moment, but we can talk about that more.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's not one of those episodes where I imagine like on a let's rewatch Deep Space Nine. Like this is not one of those episodes where you're like, oh, this is a fun show to watch and have a good time with. It's a downer. Not that it's a bad episode, but it's kind of heavy. It's a heavy one. So
So I would like to take a moment and do something that we haven't done in a little bit, which is the comparison of Jean-Luc and Cisco here,
mm,
because as you said, this is a very um, kind of a harder hitting episode than we have seen with them so far, and we see Cisco having to sit with several losses here, not just Enrique's passing right in his face, but the officers who were killed on the shuttlecraft. When he's trying to reconcile the the meaning of their deaths, making sure they didn't die in vain,
Right.
and he's like you said, he's calling out details about them, personal things, not, oh, they were always on time for their shifts and always did their duty or whatever, but this person played the trombone, I think he says, or saxophone, or whatever it was he said they played. I officiated this one's wedding, and Enrique had the same birthday as my son, and he's got these very personal details about these people, and
Right.
not even like they're not even the kind of details necessarily that you could observe from afar. These are
Right.
details that only come from having interactions with these people. Yeah, yeah, he could look up Enrique's birthday, sure, but knowing the personal connection with him and Jake, it's most likely he knows that's his birthday because there was a celebration involved and those two were together. Jake and Enrique were together at
Right.
some point.
Right.
He knows about the instrument playing because he probably heard them playing in Quarks or something. Didn't that the
Yeah.
story that he says that he was in Quarks and he heard it? And then again, he's officiating the others' weddings. We get no such stories from Jean-Luc. During his prime heyday on, Next Gen, running that ship, how many weddings did we see him officiate? Zero.
Oh, really? I think he did at least
Oh no,
one, but
that's right. He did Miles and Keiko.
thank you. I was gonna
Man,
say he did something like that at least. But yeah,
okay.
yeah, keep going, keep going.
So yeah, he officiated their wedding, but again, it doesn't seem like to me anyway that he would be the type to remember these things about them, at least during the time that he was also their captain.
Right.
As an older man who is retired and kind of reflecting back not just on his career but on his life overall, sure, he might
Right.
bring those things up. But in the moment, like Cisco was in a high pressure, tense situation, and he is, coming through with these things here
Right.
and remembering these connections.
Right.
I don't feel like Jean-Luc would do those things. Does
Yeah.
this mean that I feel like Cisco is a better leader or commander or whatever than Jean-Luc? No, I'm not necessarily saying that, but I am saying that I think that Cisco works harder at having more personal connections with the
Right.
people that he works with
Right.
than Picard ever did. I think Picard enjoyed his emotional distance.
Right.
And beyond a certain select few in the upper echelons of the command staff, I think he enjoyed having a professional distance from the crew at large.
Yeah, what we know of Picard, he's a guy who gave up a career in archaeology. His passion is archaeology, but his duty is captain. He's a guy who's already had a ship that had a big battle with a Ferengi ship. He had that whole like he has the Picard maneuver or whatever they call it. So like he's a guy who has been in battle before. He's used to it. He's got the flagship Enterprise. He doesn't got time for people living their lives. He's running a ship. There's that episode where he confronts the Romulans, and then it turns out he had two Klingon warbirds cloaked next to him, and so he's talking with the Romulan commander. And I can't remember the
Tomalak.
character's Tomalak, and they're like staring each other down, and Tomalak's all like, "You want to go?" And Picard's like, "If I have to, I will." Like, I ain't got a problem. He's chill as all get out. Meanwhile, Cisco is sweating. Cisco's a man who cares. He doesn't want his people to die. I will fight to the death. I don't trust you. He doesn't hold his cards back. He plays them, um, even though he's up against a wall. In this case, literally. Um, and so, yeah, Cisco he's not Picard, not at all. And I'm glad that you know Star Trek didn't try and recreate Picard again and again with different captains.
I feel like that is one of the areas of Star Trek that is their strength that people refuse to acknowledge because so often we do what we're doing where we try to compare the captains and it's like, well, Kirk would never do that or Picard would never do, so forth and so on. It's like, yeah, but they're not those characters. If everybody was the exact same, it would be freaking boring, you know.
Right.
But then there are times when you see aspects of the other captains in them, and I think that the closest or probably the best example of that would really be Captain Janeway and Picard. I feel like there are a lot of aspects about her character that they were trying to, in a lot of ways, make like Jean Luc, and it wasn't until later on in Voyager's run that they tried to distance themselves somewhat from it. And I'm not saying that the damage was done or it was too late or anything like that, but there were just certain traits about him that were very obvious in her that are
Right.
just too strong for you to ignore. So I think that, and even the setup of Voyager is supposed to be a lot like the Next Generation, just in a different area of space. So
Right.
I think that there was an intent there with those similarities. But I mean, certainly, Catherine Janeway proves to be her own person. She has her own kind of view on things as well, but she's still a very strong, morally convicted character, very much in the same vein as Jean-Luc, in my opinion. I know there's going to be some people who probably disagree, who don't see any kind of correlation between the two, but we could debate that at another time. We're not don't necessarily have to go on that now. And besides, David hasn't watched Voyager yet, so that debate would be wholly lost on him, and that would mean that I would win. And while I enjoy winning, I want there to be some effort
I
behind
was
my
gonna say, you want an easy win there, do you?
yeah. Not going for the low hanging fruit tonight, you know.
Yeah,
But I
probably on
do
the vine at this point.
right. But I do love how we watch Cisco's development here because I mean we got to see him for a couple of seasons as commander. We're now seeing him as for one full season as captain, and we are now moving into him kind of really asserting himself in the role. And we definitely see a lot of that here. When Worf and O'Brien their little spat about Enrique living, not living when it reaches its fever pitch, and O'Brien takes a swing at Odo, or not Odo, but at Worf, and Worf catches his fist and spins him around and gets him in a chokehold. Cisco comes, right up and just, shouts them both down. And it's
Right,
also when he, checks Dax, which we had not seen him do really ever. Dax was always this one who kind of seemed like she was in this protective bubble with Cisco because of their friendship, their you know two lifetime spanning friendship.
right,
But in this instance, when he does check her, it's a clear reminder that she's just a lieutenant to him being a captain. So regardless of their long history together, he is still her commanding officer, and
right,
they are in a tense situation, and they all needed to be reminded that they had a job to do. And I think Cisco does a very excellent job of cutting through everybody's BS that was going on in those moments and getting everybody focused and back on task. I really
right.
enjoyed that. I really do enjoy that scene in particular. So he's not only chastising, but he's also, he's team building a little bit. He cuts out all the, but seriously, because he's like, your Starfleet officers act like you have a job to do, you have tasks to perform, get back on task.
Right.
So, and
Yeah.
it was particularly effective with O'Brien because we could see O'Brien being affected by Enrique's deteriorating state, and it was
Right.
distracting him from the job he needed to be doing.
Right.
So Cisco being able to cut through that and get them moving again was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. We haven't met this character before. Like you said Enrique. Was it Enrique? I thought it was like something else.
Enrique
Oh, it is. You're right. He
Muniz,
was
yeah.
calling him KK or Coco or something, but
Kike, a
Kike.
colloquial nickname for Enrique.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, so when Enrique, when they start off, the episode opens with them walking along this, well, down from like a mountain because they're there to explore it for mining purposes. And O'Brien basically needs to take a break, and so he pretends to like, oh hey, what about this rock here? And Enrique is like, yeah, that's not anything different than anything else we've seen. And so O'Brien's like, yeah, but it's more worn. It's like got water running over it. And he's like, you just needed a place to sit down, didn't you, sir? And he's like, stop calling me sir. I'm not an officer. And yeah, he's got camaraderie, and that's one of the things that I feel like shows Star Trek here has sometimes it has a hard time doing of giving us those, just the grunts. Do we know the grunts at all? No, they come and they go. They're just off screen. You see people wearing Starfleet outfits, but the only people we actually hear any dialogue from are the main cast. And then to have that character die in the same episode he's introduced,
Well,
yeah,
that's actually not true. We have seen
really,
Enrique before. We have seen him
really,
before.
okay,
So let's go all the way back to season 4. Episode 6, Starship Down. This is where the
Okay.
Defiant has traveled into the Gamma Quadrant to rendezvous for a meet with the Karma to establish trade, and they're using Quark as their Ferengi intermediary. And they're in the bad,
Right.
or they're in the equivalent of a gaseous anomaly for this, or no, they're in space for the meeting, and then the Dominion shows up. They chase the Karma ship into a gas giant, and the
Right.
Defiant goes into the gas giant to attempt to save the Karma. And there's, some shots are exchanged. Cisco gets injured, and then the ship is basically not literally, but it's cut in half. And so, like, anybody who was below a certain deck is basically trapped in engineering. Anybody above a certain deck is trapped in the bridge. And then you had Bashir and Dax were trapped in like a side pocket corridor room for a while.
Right.
And this is where we
That's right.
first met Enrique because he was in engineering with O'Brien and Worf.
Worf.
And
And Worf
Worf
was being a bit
too
rough with
aggressive,
his
right,
commands.
right.
Yes, I remember
And
now.
yes,
Yes.
and O'Brien had to teach him how to ease up a bit. And Enrique is one of the people that he works with to kind of get things
Okay.
rolling back along again. So that's the first time we met
I
him.
remember that.
Yes. And
Okay.
then I believe he shows up, but he doesn't have any like speaking parts. He's just like kind of around as part of the engineering crew. So you kind of see him in the background a few places here and there. But then this is the next time we see him, and he's got a full on, very involved role. And yes, then he
Right.
dies.
Yeah. Bada bing, bada bam. You're dead.
Yeah.
I was glad in a, I admittedly moribund way when they found the ship crash landed. There was a group of them, and Cisco is like, "All right, let's go figure out what this ship is." And they say it's a Jim Hadar ship, and I was like, "Cisco, you can't go toward Jim Hadar's ship, bro. You gotta know this is dangerous, like super duper 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 dangerous." And then when it turns out that it's actually the other Jim Hadar ship that beams down Jim Hadar's soldiers, I'm glad that people died because it's always frustrating that it's the Star Trooper can't hit anything
Oh
syndrome.
yeah.
Um, I'm glad Enrique got hit in the sense that it actually meant the story had stakes.
But he's the only one who got hit. I could critique that scene.
Well,
It's
no, but there are other people in their group that die. I mean, there were 3 people aboard the ship.
Well, yeah. So
Well, I
when
guess
they
there's
when
only
they
one
first when
woman.
they first beam down, the random ensign in the blue uniform who's standing on top of the
Yes,
ship, he gets shot and he goes down. But then
right.
everybody else they fire upon on the ground survives except for Enrique, who gets the glancing shot. The other officers and whoever who died, they died in the shuttlecraft in orbit before they
Okay.
beamed down. But then
Well, then I guess what I'm thinking of is where did the rest of them go? Because I feel like their group was like 8 people, but with Enrique making 5 of those inside the ship, then it seems like at least 3 of them had to have died outside the ship. But maybe I'm wrong.
I don't remember there being that many of them. I'd have to go back and see, but I remember Dax, O'Brien, Worf, Cisco, random blue ensign, Enrique. So
Yes.
7, and then 2 get shot. Enrique being one of them. The other one dies. So then we have the 5 inside
That'd be 6 then.
and
If
6 inside,
Enrique and
and then
someone else got
Enrique
shot,
dies. Yeah.
so that's 6. But I
So
feel like
maybe
there
I'm
were at
missing.
least 8.
Maybe I am missing someone.
Well, I mean, if
Um,
the storyline is that 2 of them are busy working on the ship and we never get to see them talk with Cisco and the others again, okay, fine. It's just that they never get addressed again. But anyway, my point is that in terms of stakes, I want there to be realistic stakes. This episode gave us realistic stakes. We had people
mhm.
killed, we had people shot. Like the runabout gets blown up. Like they see the Jim Hadar ship, and they're like, "Cisco, there's a Jim Hadar ship." And he's like, "Get out of there!" And they're like, "We can't." Blue, they're dead. I want stakes. I want the characters to be at risk. And that's another example of why Cisco had no reason to trust the Jim Hadar. They just blew up his runabout. They're
It's true.
they're backed into a corner. He had no reason to trust that they weren't going to just kidnap them and take them back and all that jazz. Even though in just the last episode they were just interacting with, um, I'm sorry, 2 episodes ago they were interacting with the changelings with the whole Odo situation.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it was one of those episodes where I'm glad there was stakes. It was an episode that took those stakes very seriously and addressed them very seriously. I
Mhm.
appreciate that. I guess what I'm getting, I guess the thing I would say is I feel like a lot of what was happening kind of was drawn out in the sense that they were having to fix the ship and they're having to wait for rescue, and so not a lot of action happens in the meantime. I mean, there are some things that happen. Don't be wrong. That one Jim Hadar guy gets aboard the ship and they have to take him out. But a lot of time is spent trying to fix the ship, watching Enrique. He's dying, talking about if he's going to make it or not. So I feel like the episode is a little slow. It was a little
Yeah, I can see that.
uneventful, but I mean, to be fair to the storytelling, that's the point. They're having to wait. They're having to fix the ship on their own and try and survive in a very unpleasant situation. Um, so yeah, again, this is an episode where I don't imagine people are going to be like, "Let's go watch that episode again."
Yeah,
But
no. For the if you're looking for just something that you can just kind of turn on and watch, and you don't have to really kind of pay attention to anything, probably not. This is not the episode to go to. But if you are in a mood to binge watch and you're wanting to make sure you're getting all the parts of the story, you can't skip this episode because there's
right,
just so much in the way of development, not just of seeing Cisco truly in command, and also a bit of Worf, because Worf comes off as extremely harsh
yeah,
in this episode. He's very, and this seems to be a recurring theme with him since joining Deep Space Nine. We're seeing a much more aggressive Worf.
that's very
Um,
true. Yeah,
like everything that we've seen with him since again, since season four's opener, he has been very aggressive and he's been stepping it up all along the way. Every time he's involved in anything, it's always very, combative, hardcore, stuff. Um, but yeah, and you're also getting the development of the Dominion. We're seeing, we just a few episodes ago, Cisco saying, things are a long ways away, doesn't seem to be that important, we're not focused on that right now, to now they're wondering why there's a Jem'Hadar ship in the area at all. This doesn't seem to be a place that the Jem'Hadar should be, and yet here they
right,
are. Now, there's two ships because one crashed, and here comes Kalani's ship right behind them, not
right,
too much longer after it crashed.
right,
So the Dominion is getting closer. We are in the Gamma Quadrant. We are on the other side of the wormhole. And for a long time, with the show and going into the Gamma Quadrant and so forth, it seemed like once you made it through the wormhole, there was still a large amount of travel you needed to do before you ran into another civilized race of any kind. And now the Dominion seems to just be popping up around almost every corner. So they're clearly
right.
moving closer. The ominous threat that is the Dominion is getting closer. So we're seeing these conflicts here are reaching, a fever pitch. And
Right,
so, yeah, you just got to pick up on those beats, and you would miss that if you didn't see episodes like this one.
right. Actually makes me quickly just think, as you mentioned, the gym or the Dominion's getting closer and closer. If we're in the Gamma Quadrant in this episode, I do feel like the Dominion, or at least those on the Gamma Quadrant side, would have a right to say, "Hey, stay on your own side of the wormhole for like mining purposes. Like this is our side." I mean, I imagine they found an uninhabited planet with no claim to it. I'm not denying that. It's just like if I was the Dominion or the Jem'Hadar, I'd be like, "Hey, the wormhole is a barrier. It's a boundary of a certain sort. Like if you want to
Uh,
come mine here, you need to like pay a tax, kind of toll or something. But I
yeah,
don't
I mean, that's certainly a way to look at it. I mean, I like to try to make it, um, like for our solar system, for example. In order to leave our solar system, there is a barrier to our solar system, and recently the Voyager space probe went through it. Um, Finally, after
really.
all these years, yeah, it was kind of a big deal. The first thing to reach what's officially called interstellar space. You know,
Right. Okay.
so so let's just say that before it crossed this barrier, it got out there to a certain point, and then there was a alien race or a ship or something that said, "Hey, you can't go any further than this. This barrier is here for a reason." I
Right.
mean, we'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Like, no, there's get out of our way. Like we have
Right.
every right to explore and be out and whatever else because we don't know any better,
Right.
whatever. So it's just like, how are you going to claim all the rest of space?
Right.
You're going to restrict us to only what's in our solar system. And granted, our solar system is understandably vast.
Right.
It's quite vast, but
Right.
still, to be like, okay, so now we're cut off from all the rest of what could be out there beyond interstellar space just because some random race on the other side of it said, yeah, no, we've been watching you and we don't like you, so we're gonna keep you right here. We put this barrier up for a reason. That would just seem ridiculous to us. And I think that,
Right.
it's kind of how we look at the wormhole.
Right. That actually reminds me, as you mentioned, like traditions of like who gets what. The wreckage is claimed by Cisco as a legitimate salvage as a way to defend. No, we're not giving the ship up, even though it's a Jem'Hadar ship, and the Jem'Hadar have come to reclaim it. What do you think about that? Do you think Cisco
Oh,
legitimately?
I thought it was hilarious. I
Yeah,
love the plucky way he delivered the line too.
yeah,
No, this is legitimate salvage. I claim it under salvage rights. And I was like, Cisco, come on. Like the sheer cheekiness, to use the
yeah,
term, the
yeah.
which you just delightfully said, an old tradition,
Right.
salvage rights. It's like,
Yes. Yeah.
good and damn well she doesn't know anything about salvage rights.
Yeah.
Shut up.
She immediately says like, we don't recognize
Right.
those. Thank you very
Um,
much.
and again, and it wouldn't work for anything that we did either. It's the same thing as, you built a car with your own two hands, right?
Right.
And you drove it, and then it broke down somewhere, and you had to walk 3 miles to the gas station to get gas or to get a service truck or whatever. And when you came out, somebody else was sitting in your truck, not going anywhere, just sitting in it. And they said, "Oh, I found it. Salvage rights. It's
Yeah.
mine now." You'd be like,
Right.
"Get the hell out of my truck!" Like you're not. No way. That
Yeah.
would be our immediate reaction.
Exactly.
So yeah, salvage rights. That's one of those definitely old maritime tradition because if it was truly abandoned, right? The possibility of the person who originally owned it ever finding it again was extremely remote back then.
Right.
So yeah, at that point, salvage makes sense because then if someone else found it, repaired it, and then used it, the chances of you running into the original owner would be, again, very much, it'd be years before that ship might turn back up in port somewhere.
Right.
And yeah, salvage rights makes total sense on something like that, but not in this day and age. Not with the way that we mark stuff and the instantaneous nature of technology and everything else. And it's going to only be worse in the 24th century. That is not going to be, you know, easier to fudge. And I mean, heck,
Right.
even when the ship crashed into the mountainside upside down, Worf was able to identify it as a Jem'Hadar warship. So, sorry, Cisco, salvage rights not going to fly.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
It definitely felt like pretty thin reasoning when you first
Yeah.
brought it up. But yeah, I mean, I imagine that was part of what contributed to the distrust between him and Kilana or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, gosh, as soon as I heard it was a Jem'Hadar ship, I was like, Cisco, you and the boys need to go find defensive position right now. Because if there are any, I mean, we didn't know there were any dead ones yet, but like the Jem'Hadar are a fighting people. You know that they aren't going to just give up the ship. So the fact that they were all walking up to it and we're like, oh, we got to find a way into this. I'm like, guys, what are you doing? I really thought they were crazy. I thought them trying to get into this Jem'Hadar ship was boneheaded. The fact that they were all dead inside was a blessing in terms of all of them living. But okay.
And to kind of think of it, I think that is the bit of a plot, what I guess plot hole here, with the fact that we know that the Jem'Hadar can beam through just about anything. We haven't found anything that can stop their beaming technology, and they do kind of use to their advantage when they slip the one Jem'Hadar on board and attacks them. Why didn't they send more? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And they try to play it off as, oh, well, they were wanting to make sure they didn't hurt the founder. The founder was in hiding,
Right.
and they knew that. I mean, they have the scanners and the ability to tell who's human and or Klingon or whatever. Basically, who's not a changeling.
Right.
So sending in a strike team to obliterate the 5, 6 people left inside and free their ship would have been nothing to them. It
Yeah.
didn't make sense to me that they didn't do that. If you're
Right.
able to show up, scan the station, scan who's there, and with pinpoint accuracy call out the commanding officer by name,
Yeah.
There is no reason that you can't tell who's human and who's not, who's a founder and who's not. So that
Right.
didn't work for me at all. I was like, no, you should have sent in a strike force. You could
They
have
should have
overwhelmed
sent
them.
They should have sent in the
Yeah,
strike force. I mean, my understanding of the scene was Cisco coming out and talking opened the ship up to being beamed into. Like the Jem'Hadar maybe have technology on their ships that prevents being beamed onto unless they allow it. And then him opening up the ship allowed the one guy, but it should have been one guy. You're right. It should have been a whole strike team.
at least
Um,
at least a 5-person team, one for
right,
one. You
right,
know,
exactly.
something along those
Because
lines. And I also
because
didn't
Worf is
appreciate.
already out of the ship. He's the most
Hmm.
dangerous one. All you got to do is hold Dax or O'Brien hostage, and suddenly you got the whole thing in your
You
favor.
got a whole new set of leverage there, right?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. To say nothing of Enrique dying in the corner, if two
yeah,
Jem'Hadar had beamed in and taken Dax and O'Brien hostage and been like, "We'll give him back when you get out of our ship," Cisco
right,
would have given them the ship. He
right.
absolutely would have given them the ship. There's
Yeah, it
no
would have been.
reason for yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So I felt like that was a little bit of a plot hole there. They should have exploited that a bit more.
yeah.
I was doing some reading about some of the behind the scenes development of the episode, and there was something they talked about that I thought was very interesting that they didn't do, which would have made like the creep factor on this episode a little bit higher. There was the discussion of, when we're first introduced to Kalani, she calls into the ship and she tells Cisco how to activate the panel so that they can talk or whatever.
Right,
There was a brief discussion behind the scenes of only doing her voice, never actually having the actress appear on the screen, so that their whole interaction would have just been this
the
very pleasant
voice.
but ruthless voice that he's trying to
Mm-hmm,
negotiate with.
mm-hmm.
And with all the Enrique dying, it's hot, it's dirty inside. They're shelling the surrounding area, and the tensions being ratcheted, and you're hearing this voice just say over and over again, very sweetly, very pleasantly, um, "If you do this, we'll let you go.
Right.
Just trust me. All
Yeah,
you got to do is trust me." I think that would have been a great little thing to have going throughout this episode, but they didn't do it.
yeah. You're saying that
Whatever.
reminds me of the Tom Cruise movie Oblivion, where that's actually kind of part of the plot, where he thinks the female, the woman he's talking with, like there's a screen of this woman with a headset on, he thinks he's talking to, but then the movie reveals that that's not real. He's talking to an alien presence that's using that image and that voice to communicate with him. And, the climax is him confronting the entity that's been using that voice. Um, Anyway, yeah, fun movie. Not the best movie ever, but a fun one. Um, but
Hmm.
yeah,
Well, I think that we've pretty much covered everything about this episode. We didn't really get into our B plot because there wasn't really much of a
it
B
was
plot.
one
It was
quick scene.
yeah, just to
It
kind of
was
show us
just
where
to
everybody
give them,
was. Yeah,
yeah, those actors deserve a paycheck, and they're not in this episode, and they're on the credits, so they got to have at least something. And that was four of our main cast. That's Odo, Bashir, Quark, and Kira. That was the only scene any of them appeared in for this entire episode,
which
and
is
then everything
interesting
else.
considering that 3 of the 4 of them have to do makeup. So, some pretty Kira's got her nose ridges, Odo
Yeah.
full, goat hair.
Bashir's like, call me from my trailer when I'm ready. When you're
Yeah,
ready, guys.
Bashir probably was so excited. He's like probably pulled up, screeching tires. I got to be
Yeah,
on the set in 20 minutes. How about you?
yeah.
I've been here for 9 hours just putting this on.
Another 9 hours to take it off. Yeah.
Right. So
Uh,
yeah, I could just see that. He's just all strolling in, rested, refreshed. I woke up at 8:30. I've been here since 4. Like, yeah, I could just all of that just for that scene, just to do
goodness.
that scene. So it's probably one of those things because again, back then in the '90s when they were filming these stuff, they were doing crazy 18-hour days of filming to do these episodes. I wouldn't be surprised at all if, knowing that they were only going to have this short scene, they probably filmed it at the end of the previous episodes um filming,
Yeah, I was gonna
and
say
then
that
those
might
guys were
very
probably done
well
for the
be.
day. Yeah,
Yeah,
then they were probably done for the day. You got to go home, and then you were off early, and
yeah,
got to go and whatever, where everybody else still had to stay on and work
right.
and do any reshoots, touch ups, so forth and so on. So yeah, probably what happened there.
Yep, yep.
But yeah, I just love that that was the kind of the joking part of it was that Quark had taken advantage of the well-meaning Bashir to smuggle in some aphrodisiacs. Because of course, only
Yeah,
Quark would just So
yeah. We've never actually seen Quark get punished really outside of Odo threatening and holding him by the ear, and Odo just always uses Quark to find the suppliers. You know, Quark is the connection to the bigger bads, so he'll just let Quark get away with things because has bigger fish to fry. At some point,
essentially, yes.
it'd be funny to see Quark up in front of some kind of judge and see like this long rap sheet that Odo's finally brought. You know, all the things Odo's had him for all this time, but
All
I
the things
imagine
he's
that'll
been
never happen.
watching,
Yeah.
all the things he's been watching and waiting, and it's like, and finally time to get rid of this crooked, annoying barkeep.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for us tonight, which is, just fine with me. Again, not an episode that we can necessarily, skip if you're trying to get the full story of the
Oh, it's a good.
development of the
That's a
Dominion.
good point. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, otherwise, if you're looking for just the kind of the action-packed whatever of it, this is probably not it for you. But I would still
Right.
say that it's deserving of a rewatch, especially if you're a person who hasn't seen the show in quite a while. So yeah, go check that out. Um, and let us know what you think. You can always leave us messages and stuff wherever it is that you want to, do that. We're on all the social medias, of course, and you can tune in and watch us live on YouTube. When it comes to the show, of course, you can listen to it on anywhere you listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. But until we come back next week and do it all over again, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.